When answering exam questions, there are a few key things to remember, right? So just remember, exam technique is a key part in preparation for any exams, and it's something that you'll pick up the more you go and you do past papers. Right, so many questions in exams are repeats of what will be in old exams. So going and looking at lots of generic questions beforehand is a good idea. When going and answering and questions and reading them, there's a few things just take into account. Make sure you go read the question at least twice so you don't make any mistakes when you're reading them. As you're reading them, go highlight key information. Don't make assumptions about what the question's asking. Make sure after you've answered it, you go check your work for daft errors that you might make. And if it involves going and answering something where there's some calculation, make sure that you write your workings out down. Right, let's go and have a look at the question.
We're just going to take a very quick look at a exam question that involves alcohols. Right, so this question primarily talks about the production of alcohol. So some key things to go and think about before we start answering it. Right, so fermentation is the process of the production of ethanol. It occurs when yeast breaks down sugars in the absence of oxygen. Right, fermentation is used to make alcoholic drinks, etc. So the process of fermentation is that we start off by having something like wheat is ground up, so it releases the stored glucose. So water and yeast is then added to the mixture. We then go and filter it, so we separate out any of the large material from the liquid. The mixture then enters a fermenter where the yeast converts the glucose into ethanol. Right? So the water and the ethanol is then separated by distillation. So if we go and think about this question here, so it says ethanol can be made by a plant and from crude oil, right? So two different ways that ethanol are going to be produced, right? As shown in the diagram below. So that part there is talking about fermentation. That part there is talking about the hydration of ethene and from crude oil. Right, so describe how the solution of sugar and water is used to produce a mixture of ethanol and water. Right, so we're talking about fermentation. So the key things that you'll need to talk about is that you need to add yeast. You're doing this by fermentation, and then just talk about some of the conditions. So you're going to need it in a relatively warm place. If you want to go and give a temperature range, that's also fine. And in the absence of air or in the absence of oxygen is also important. So the next part talks about ethanol has a boiling point of 78 degrees, water has a boiling point of 100 degrees. Right, so describe how distillation can be used to separate ethanol and water. So just to remind you that simple distillation can be used to separate liquids with different boiling points. Right. Simple distillation can be used relatively effectively for things that have a boiling point of at least 50 degrees or above. So if we just go and have a very, very quick look at the equipment, so you've got some sort of flask there that you would have your mixture in, you've got your heat source, you have a condenser there, so that would go and condense any vaporous ethanol that came off. So if you're looking at the key bits that you'll need to talk about in this answer, so to start off you need to talk about heating the mixture. You need to talk about the fact that the ethanol has a lower boiling point than the water, right? So therefore it vaporizes before the water does, or it vaporizes at 78 degrees. Then you need to talk about the fact that you are going to go and condense the ethanol in that condenser. And they're kind of some of the key things that you'll need to speak about.
So hopefully you have found that useful. If you've got any questions, then drop it in the comments below, and we'll be uploading a lot more. Right, good luck folks.